high school, I was the obnoxiously independent tryhard. I knew what I wanted, and 99% of the time, I knew exactly how to get it. And sadly, this reality often included boys. So there was this one boy in particular who back and forth flirting resulted in him asking me to a school dance in front of our entire school after he played a piano piece at a talent show. So I felt like a princess, but most importantly, I had won the boy. Fast forward about a year and a half later, I was telling my mom all the details of how we had broken up, and there were a lot of things that gave her great pause. I was things that I really had no second thought about. She was shocked about. Some of the conversations and arguments we had over the course of our relationship were red flags of an emotionally abusive relationship, but I had no idea. So I was often confused, like, how did I fall into this? I didn't have any major pitfalls in my life that I thought made me more susceptible. Why did all these people think we had a great relationship whenever we didn't? But none of that was my fault because I was not educated by my parents, by my school, or by my culture as to what a verbally abusive relationship looked like. So I want to implement an educational period alongside sex ed in public schools that teaches boys and girls in public high school what the signs are, how it affects you differently, and then also I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to help me implement that. So a lot of different abuses sometimes are normalized. One of the most common is physical abuse, and it is defined as any non-accidental physical injury or action that results in physical impairment of the individual. So this is your most typical abuse where you're covering your eye with makeup. This is pretty, I don't want to say normalized in our society, but it's easier to identify because you have proof of physical harm. So obviously I want to add in a little bit about this education, but focus more on verbal abuse. So going through verbal abuse, it's harder to identify because you don't see marks, scratches, and bruises. And most people aren't aware of what the common terminology is surrounding it. So verbal abuse, as defined by just the recognition of emotional sources, is any verbal interaction that causes another harm. And so there are a lot of newer terms associated with this, but some of the most recent terms include just domestic violence. So this is any verbal or physical interaction between partners that causes harm. These are just things that we commonly refer to, but psychologists have been coming up with newer terms. The first being gaslighting. So gaslighting is any physiological manipulation of a person, usually over an extended period of time, that causes the victim to question the validity of their own thoughts, perception of reality, or memories, and typically leads to a dependency on the perpetrator. So this is a newer term many are using in our generation. Another would be love bombing. So the Women's Health Organization defines love bombing as that just kind of obsessive nature in the honeymoon phase. A lot of people won't realize this is a red flag, but it is because of the duality of the perpetrator. So he or she may present themselves as just gloating and I love you so much, we're soulmates, and that kind of covers up and makes the victim excuse other manipulative behaviors that show kind of just an underlying narcissistic nature. Most people don't understand how big of an issue this is. So, especially in California, Chapman University did a study finding that 69% of teens struggled with some sort of daily violence in Orange County. So this is a huge problem that over half of the population in this area is dealing with. Along with that starting the LA Times has released dozens of articles interviewing women about their personal testimony. One in particular named Irene, she went through, she focused a lot on how a lot of women, whenever they face this, they don't go to adults, they go to other teenage girls. And that makes this cyclical nature even worse because then it's normalized in society. You don't have that adult presence stepping in and saying, no, this is not right, this is wrong, you need to educate you about this. And in another LA Times article, another victim named Carol talks about her instance with, she dealt with a lot of the love bombing, where in the interview, she talks about how she would just excuse the manipulative behavior from her partner because at other times he was that perfect guy that she'd always wanted. She also dealt with another huge red flag, which is certain claims like after we break up, I'm going to harm myself in some way. Most teenage girls have no idea how to face different, like whenever that's presented to them, you have no idea how to deal with that. So I want to include that in the educational period as well. Looking at how the media has influenced this, the social license map has this quote saying, The line between romantic and unhealthy behavior is constantly blurred by the television and movie portrayals. Actions telegraphed as adoring or lovingly persistent can actually be emotionally abusive and can make it more difficult for teenagers to recognize these tendencies in their own relationships. So, a lot of shows that we think are completely normal, like The Bachelor, have these extreme power dynamics that aren't really good to be showing teenage girls and fantasizing about. Another one being one of the most popular shows on Netflix is You. And this just looks over a stalker who is compulsive, he's emotionally abusive towards his victims, very physically abusive as well. But like I said, it's one of the top shows. So what are we putting out for our teens to view as just a normal part of their culture? And how much of that are they going to adopt into their dating world? So I want to highlight how this damage will affect girls later. And obviously it's going to go far beyond their teenage dating years. A Canadian study looked at, they took victims in, gave them one session of therapy, and then asked them then how they felt after. And over a third of the victims came back for 3 more sessions. And a lot of the quotes revolved around how that validation, seeing that what happened wasn't normal, gave them this new sense of security, that they didn't have to work through those lingering trust issues anymore. So there are tons and tons of ways that it affects girls. Some girls will be overly cautious in relationships and end them out of just that abundance of caution. And other girls sadly seek out partners who are verbally abusive because that's all they knew in their early dating years to be considered as normal. So whenever a guy or a girl does treat them right, it's often uncomfortable for them because they never had that experience before. The Journal of Interpersonal Violence did a study looking at different demographics, so age groups, gender groups, and showed them clear red flags. And they looked at who could identify the red flags and who's least likely to identify red flags. And sadly, young teenage girls were the least likely to identify flags looking at dominance or manipulation of some sort. So it is crucial that we implement some sort of learning pattern. One of the hardest parts that I want to educate teen girls about is the fallout as well. So in her book, Amanda Gray's Protecting Your Teenage Daughters, she talks about this gray area and how adults often just see it in this black and white, you should have done this, you should have done this, whenever girls are struggling with emotion and men are struggling with emotion connected to their perpetrator, but also feeling that guilt of why did I stay in this relationship. So as important as it is to show red signs, red flags, also want to educate them on what to deal with if they ever do find themselves in this kind of a relationship. So now I want to give you the opportunity to do something about it. I did say earlier I wanted to implement it in the sex ed realm. So looking, every office has a counseling center. So I would want during this educational period about abusive relationships, I'd want the counseling center to come in, make themselves available, just give resources, and then other ideas are to give them certain websites or checklists or platforms for accountability partners with relationships, just to show them you can build a community based off of healthy dating, and it doesn't have to be this intimidating concept. So the first step in doing this is contacting your legislator. This website right here, since we're all from different areas, you just type in your home address zip code, pops up with your House of Representative and their personal information, has their whole website. So you can email, call, contact them in any way. And then the second is this petition to educate teens about all types of dating violence. It's already been created, and that is the link right there. So I had an extremely mild situation with verbal abuse, but any education towards it would have spared me a lot of emotional, like just an emotional roller coaster. So to conclude, we looked at the definitions of different types of abuse, the red flags, how it affects girls after, and then obviously what you can do about it. So I do just want to reinforce that every public school student could be impacted by this, male and female. And I want to leave you with a quote by Dia Reeves that says, "Emotional abuse is just as bad as physical abuse. Worse. You can heal broken bones, you can't heal a broken